David and Kent and Brian. Thank you. Beautiful music and a beautiful message in that song. Yes. Today we continue our series on the gifts of winter. And we focus on the joy of rest. We're going to be exploring why rest is so important and what's really happening in that place of rest. As Mark's saying in that beautiful song, far beneath the snow, I kind of chuckle when I do this here in New Mexico because we just really don't have the winters that a lot of people are used to. But far beneath the snow, whether it be in our imagination or not, there are things happening. Life is happening. Expansion is happening. Growth is happening. Seeds are germinating. So as we move further into this series on the gifts of winter, we learn that life does not cease in the winter time, whether it be the winter of the season or a winter experience in our lives, a time when we are ceasing from the doing to regroup, to recharge. Life does not cease. But rest is incredibly important. More important, I think, than we, especially in our culture, realize. Think about the creation allegory in Genesis. 2 stories about how God created the world in a literal interpretation of the knowledge they had available at the time that story was created. 2 different stories. Have you ever wondered why Genesis 1 is about God creating the universe and the earth and everything, and Genesis 2 is a repeat of Genesis 1 with a few variations? Why is that? Well, because in Genesis 1, that story is all happening in the mind of God. It's not yet formed. It's the creating of the image of what will be. And then in Genesis 2, there's the manifestation. When that image moves from just a thought into expression. That is how we create. And that is how the universe is created. And we can get into the science of years and days and all of that. That doesn't matter. It's an allegory. It's an allegory for what happens at the different times of our lives, the different times of our creative process. And one of the parts of that story that's so important and oftentimes so overlooked and so misunderstood is the 7th day, when God takes a rest. Now, I am here to tell you, that day was probably not called Sunday. I promise you, thousands of years ago, they didn't have the same names for the days of the week. And I promise you, God didn't say it has to be a certain day. The stories that we have collected in the Hebrew Scriptures and in the New Testament sometimes are allegories for our lives. And don't get hung up in the day. Get hung up in the message. The message is you have to take time to rest. In his book, Reading the Bible Again for the First Time, Marcus Borg addresses the importance of the Sabbath in chapter 2. He shares that the P story, that's the one that starts with, let there be light. And P just means that's who they identified as being the author. And it was a style of writing. Priestly is what it stands for. We don't know who wrote it. It was written long before even the Hebrew people. But in the P story, beginning with let there be light, it ends with the creation of man and woman over a 6-day period and the resting of God on the 7th day. Now think about that. Here is a being, if you consider it a being or an energy or a force, that is omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent. Do you think it really gets tired? No. But what is the purpose of rest? Marcus Borg writes that this version of creation, written around 500 BCE, when the Jewish people had returned from exile, they found themselves under the domination of a new imperial power, Persia. And under this dominion, they wanted to sustain their identity as a people. and to have unique practices. And one of those practices was observing a day of rest. That was not common in the world. This was something new. Borg asks, so why does creation take place in 6 days? It does so to make the point that even God observes a Sabbath. Now, we know it wasn't 6 24-hour periods. It was probably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. But God takes a Sabbath. The life force, the creative energy that the universe is and that we embody in the microcosm has to take a rest. Jesus, too, thought that rest was important. Think about all the times that he withdrew from the crowds, went apart from the crowds to sit and meditate, and sometimes even take a nap. He was sleeping in the boat when the storm came up, remember? But one thing people don't realize, Jesus did not take a rest on Saturday, the Sabbath. He was actually accused of doing work on the Sabbath. It wasn't about a day. It was about a vital process in his life and our life. You know, we get hung up, I think, sometimes in a saying that we use a lot. Well, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Yes, that is true, but you are a human being also, not just a spiritual being. And we sometimes in our religion and our spiritual path, we get all caught up in trying to be more spiritual, to be totally in that place of spirit. And we forget that we are human beings. And this vessel that we occupy, that we call a body, needs rest. This mind that does our thinking, that powers our imagination, needs rest. And the very process of creation, whether it be creating a new career or a new family or a new lifestyle or whatever, has to have a time of rest. We put all of our focus into our spiritual part too often, and we neglect or even dishonor the human aspect of ourselves. We have to have that time to rest and recharge, for the inner work to be accomplished, because it is when we are resting on the physical level that healing takes place, that new cells are created, that digestion occurs, that our brain is cleaned out to make room for new ideas. We need rest in body, mind, and spirit. There's a wonderful book called Remember the Sabbath by Wayne Miller. And he writes this: in the relentless busyness of modern life, we have lost the rhythm between work and rest. It's all about rhythm, the ebb and flow of energy. Even in the physical world, think about a wavelength. You've all probably seen pictures of wavelengths, or sound waves, or light waves. It's all energy. And there's a high and a low, and the resting point is in the middle. Even energy itself has that split second of rest, where there's not a positive or a negative, there's a neutral. In music, I have heard it said that it is the space between the notes that are as important as the notes themselves, that place of rest. Wayne Miller goes on, all life requires a rhythm of rest. There is a rhythm in our waking activity and the body's need for sleep. There's a rhythm in the way the day dissolves into the night and night into morning. There is a rhythm in the active growth of spring and summer, and then that is quieted by the necessary dormancy of fall and winter. There is a tidal rhythm, a deep, eternal conversation between the land and the sea. And in our bodies, the heart perceptibly rests after each life-giving beat. The lungs rest between the exhale and the inhale. All of life is telling us how important rest is. Think about plants. If a plant does not lie dormant in the winter, it cannot bear fruit the following summer. And if that happens too many times, the plant will die. Luther Burbank did some research and proved that if a species of a plant that would normally be dormant in the winter is not allowed to become dormant over a long period of time, that very species will become extinct. We're already seeing that happening with climate change. Plants and animals that are not able to become dormant in the winter are disappearing. It's teaching us, it's showing us that how vital it is, this period of rest. This period in which nutrition and fertility coalesce. And it's not simply a human psychological need, it is a spiritual and a biological necessity. A lack of dormancy for ourselves produces disorder in our thinking, confusion, and erosion of our life force. We too must have a period when we lie dormant, when we lie fallow, to restore our souls. And our Sabbath time, we take not just to rest, but to celebrate that which is beautiful and sacred. That is why in the winter we light candles, we sing songs, we celebrate the light with our winter holidays. It is a time to let our work, our lands, and our hands lie fallow, to be nourished and refreshed. And within this sanctuary, then, we open ourselves up in the quietude to divine ideas, to seeds of what we can grow in our life experience. We use winter to illustrate the process in our own lives. The truth is that the Sabbath need not be a set time, that our winter experience for ourselves doesn't have to be between the months of December and March. Think about Jesus. Jesus took his Sabbath as it was needed, and we can do the same. It may be a day, it may be a week, it may be a few minutes. It's not the length of time that's important, it's the consistency. There's a story I love about Charles Fillmore, our co-founder. You may not think about this, we often don't, but Charles and Myrtle were parents. They had little kids, 3, and their little kids had their friends over. Now, I know we always picture Charles and Myrtle as being very holy and centered, but they had children running around the house. And there's a story that is told about one time when their kids were little, and they had their friends over. And one of their friends said, I believe it was to Lowell Fillmore, he said, "What is wrong with your dad?" And Lowell said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, every time I go by his office, I look in there and he's sitting in his chair asleep." Charles had a habit of taking moments of Sabbath where he would stop, close his eyes, and turn within and just be still, to allow a seed idea of whatever he was working on, whatever he was writing, to germinate, to grow. Because he knew that there has to be that time when the seed idea, like the rose, is laying under the snow, waiting. There has to be that time it can have to germinate, to grow its roots. And Charles did that many times a day, so I can imagine why his kids' friends wondered what was going on. Charles said it doesn't matter how long you meditate, it matters how consistently you meditate. It can be for 1 minute. I have people come to me and say, "I don't have time to meditate." Yes, you do. Yes, you do. Start with 1 minute. 1 minute. If you cannot take 1 minute out of your day, you seriously need to re-examine your day. It's not healthy if you can't do that. So Charles did this. Charles understood what the Buddhists know, that when we act from a place of deep rest, we cultivate right understanding, right action, right effort. And in a complex and unstable world, if we do not rest, if we do not surrender to some kind of a Sabbath, how can we find our way? We get so caught up in the doing that we lose sight of the way. We're always focused on this moment right here. How can we hear the voices telling us what is the right thing to do? Wayne Muller writes, "If we refuse to rest until we are finished, we will never rest until we die. Sabbath dissolves the artificial urgency of our days because it liberates us from the need to be finished." I'm going to let you in on something I have realized, at least in my life. There's a weird noise coming from up here. One of the things that I have realized in my life is that I've never finished anything. Now, on one hand, you're going, really? Maybe we need to talk about this. But if you think about it, you may complete one task or one goal and think it's completed, but what has it really done? It's just opened the door to a further evolution of it, to a greater expression of it, or maybe to a whole new idea. We've talked about spiritual rest and mental rest. In the book, The Art of Extreme Care, the author advises us to ask these questions. Where in your life do you feel deprived? Do you need to unplug? Where are you overcommitting? Oh, we do that in our culture so much. Excuse me. You know, one of the most powerful things you can say, write this down. I see some of you taking notes. This is important. The most powerful statement you can ever say is no. Is there a mouse up here or something? I don't know if anybody else can hear it, but it's like there's something knocking up here. No. No, stop that. No. It's okay. If something is not feeling like it's yours to do, or even if you think it is yours to do and you take it into meditation and you get the message, no. There's other people who have the talent to do that. No allows us to say yes to that which is ours to do, to that which is our gift. Being unable to say no leads to depression, anxiety, personality disorders, the ability to learn, eating disorders, lack of sleep, which also leads to all of those things I just listed. Rest is important. The author of Extreme Self-Care, Cheryl Richardson, writes, "Enjoying a life of extreme self-care means living and working in a soul-nurturing environment, developing a greater appreciation for and connection with nature. One way we can rest is to go out in nature. And we are so blessed. Many of us went on a hike yesterday. We are so blessed to live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet with gorgeous weather." She goes on to write, "We develop a greater appreciation and connection with nature that allows us to do work that provides an opportunity to express our greatest gifts and talent. If we are not rested, if we don't take that time, that winter time experience, for whether it be any length of time, if we don't do that, we cannot give our gifts effectively." I've seen so many of us in our culture today where we're so busy doing that we've lost the ability to shine our light, to share our gift, to be who we truly came here to be. Because every human being came to this life to be something. Every human being came to this life to share a gift. So when our physical and spiritual practices do not align with the way we live our life, we are prevented from being who we are and from being able to receive that which we most need. We all have needs of encouragement, needs of support, our physical needs, our need to be able to shine. It's an actual need. It is why we are here. Rest is important. In the book that I've been quoting from, she writes, "Millions of people fail to get the recommended 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And one study revealed that along with tight deadlines, a bad night's sleep was one of the top 2 factors that upsets people's moods. Another study suggested that getting even 1 extra hour of sleep a night will do more for your happiness than getting a $60,000 a year raise. Now, I am willing to test that one, board, just so you know. But that's what studies show. In America, the average adult sleeps 5.9 hours a night, and maybe up to 7.9 on a weekend. That's 20% less than the average adult slept in 1920. Now think about 1920. We didn't have very much in the way of electric lighting. We were more in tune with the cycle of the day and the seasons. And though we didn't have the health care we have today, many of the diseases that we have today were not prevalent at that time. High blood pressure, heart attack, obesity, diabetes were nowhere near as prevalent in those days as they are today. Studies have shown that sleep deprivation impairs memory, weakens the immune system, slows the metabolism, and even fosters weight gain. So how do we change that? We change it by remembering the Sabbath. By not staying up to meet some arbitrary work deadline, or to watch a favorite TV show, or to get things done faster. There is a way to do things more efficiently. But I remember a cell phone commercial I saw a few years ago, and it showed these 2 people with the newest cell phone, and they were 17 seconds ahead of the rest of the world. And I remember there was a line in there where somebody says something, and the other person says, well, that was so 14 seconds ago. Sometimes we mistake efficiency with speed. Efficiency just means working smarter, and part of working smarter is taking that time for rest. So in the gifts of winter, we celebrate the joy of rest. We celebrate the Sabbath, whether it be on a Sunday or a moment in the afternoon or any time. We do like Jesus did. When we need to go within, we go within. When we need to cease the outer work, to rest and allow our seed ideas to regerminate, our energy to reinvigorate, we do it. We do it. And it can be for a second or a day. So we celebrate the joy of rest. We think about the gifts of winter and what we can learn from all the seasons. And so today, before we rest, we are going to grab some burritos, and we are going to have our annual meeting. But take a moment in that space between the time we finish the service today and the time you get your coffee. Just take a moment, maybe right in your chairs after the peace song, or even while you're standing up, and just close your eyes. Take a deep breath and celebrate the joy of rest. Namaste.